From formation to taxation, covering inflation, temptation, high expectations, and that dreaded stagnation, we bring to you Hip Nation.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Hip Nation. We are at episode 12 this week, and we have like the coolest guest in here today who will get her own intro in a moment. We don't have a title for this episode yet. As you hear it, you will see the title on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, but we are not titling it as we record it because we're going to come up with a title afterwards because we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So, if you have heard our last two episodes, you will know that we have a special secret code word embedded in the podcast somewhere. What do you do with this code word? Well, for 4 episodes, so the previous 2, this one, and the next one, you'll write down the code word that you hear me talk about. And you will have a total of 4 code words, except for our last episode had a bonus code word. And at the end of 4 weeks, I'll put a call out on social media. You DM me your code words that you wrote down. And if you have all 4 and they're correct, you're entered to win a $250 Hip Nation gift basket, which contains a hoodie, a shirt, a pop socket, a Spotify gift card, and a really nice set of headphones. So that's it for the code word. And then I also have to mention that we now have a donate button. This is brand new to our podcast. So if you liked our podcast and you feel like it warrants even $1 sent our way, we would love to have some donations come so we can upgrade equipment and do all the things to bring you better podcasts. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of these things. And lastly, before I hand this off to my special co-host today, I have to mention that we now have books. So we always ask our guests for a book recommendation at the end of an episode. Surprise! And from those books, we link them on our website, right on our podcast page on the graphicallyhip.com website. So if you use that link to buy the book that gets talked about on the podcast, then we get a kickback from that from Amazon. Yay, Amazon. So that's it for all my promo blah, blah, blahs. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-host today, who you all know. This is Daryl Richards. Take it away.
Thanks for having me again. I think you're doing the intro, though, for the special guest today. So
I will, yeah, because I'm so
thanks
excited.
for having me again. I love doing these. So this one's kind of neat, too, because we get a celebrity in here today.
We do. This is our first
More celebrity than
celebrity. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Tracy was kind of a celebrity, but a local
true.
celebrity. But this is a real celebrity or public figure that we have today. So we're very excited to welcome to the show Bree Harrison, who formerly was on the Gold Rush series of shows. But tell us about yourself, Bree.
Well, I really appreciate you calling me a celebrity. I do not agree, but thank you.
You're so modest.
So, like you said, my name is Bree Harrison. I was on seasons 7 to 10 of Gold Rush, but I left after season 10. I do still work on a gold mine. The last 2 years, I took a job with another mine that offered me the growth opportunities that I wasn't going to get staying on the show. And in the off season, and possibly year round from now on, I'm hoping to stay here in Penticton, where I now live. I've been living in BC for just about 10 years now, but I grew up in Ontario. And when I was 18, with $200 and a couple suitcases, I flew across the country, and what I thought was going to be a year here turned into 10, and I don't think I could live anywhere else in Canada. So,
wow.
Yeah, I've turned what I never thought was going to be my career into what I'm hoping can help promote women in trades and advocate for the visibility that so many girls wish they could see in a lot of these industries. And I really appreciate you bringing me on because I think that could help.
It's my pleasure and Daryl's pleasure too. Yeah. I know right before Christmas, Bree had us commissioned a hoodie for her dad through us. Didn't know us from a hole in the ground, but trusted us to make her dad a hoodie. Anyway, she was here and Daryl happened to be here when she came, and we were chatting a little bit, and as soon as she left, and I asked her at that time if she wanted to be on the podcast, and as soon as she left, Daryl was like, "I call dibs. Yeah. I want Bree's episode." Yeah. So,
I'm honored.
Yeah, it's truly our pleasure to have you here. And
yeah, it's amazing.
It's important to me too that something that you mentioned when we first met was that it was hard to meet people here, and I'd like to try my best to change that for you. Like, I'm the kind of person that when someone has a problem, I want to fix it. And sometimes I go too far with that, but
most of the time.
Yeah.
Penticton is so cliquey. I can't believe it. And maybe just being in my age group of, I guess now late 20s, because I just had a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah. A little too close to 30 for comfort now. But
yeah,
it's
Me too.
I've been able to maintain my friendships from the coast, but yeah, I don't know how anybody does it here. If you didn't grow up here, you're an outcast.
Well, so I'm a part of a service group, which I told you about, JCI, and I'd never really met a whole lot of real friends in my life until I joined that. And I want to get you in there, but even if I don't, you have an open invitation to come hang out with us anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you're a busy girl, but I'll keep trying.
I'll keep bugging to be less busy.
You know, it's kind of funny when you were talking about how you have transitioned this whole kind of your fame, I guess, into advocating for women in, let's call them male-dominated industries. You know, to touch on the whole Gold Rush TV series, it's not alone in the fact that they definitely show women in the industry. I don't watch a lot of reality TV shows. The ones I do are typically based around, you know, car building or classic car stuff. Like I like the mechanical stuff. I'm a fabricator by trade and I like to build my own stuff. So they all in the last 10 to 15 years, all of those series are definitely getting more inclusive in what they have for staff and people in those trades. You see a lot of women doing amazing fabrication work, car rebuilding, race car drivers. Like all of these series have that in common, and I see this as a common thing to advocate for women in the stereotypical male-dominated roles.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to see, because I've always been an advocate for women in trades. As a fabricator, I always asked, how come there's not more women doing this? And the women we did have doing this were doing, you know, more specialized parts of the trade. So like I was never really good at TIG welding, but I worked at a shop where the only TIG welder we had in the whole shop was a woman.
That's amazing.
Because they had a finer touch and they were a little more attention to detail on the small stuff. Because TIG can be very tricky, and so that was our TIG welder was a woman, and that was the first time I'd seen a woman in a welding shop. I was like, what is this? And they were like, oh, she's our TIG welder, and she was amazing.
Well, yeah. And I've heard too that in these, my husband is a welder too, and he has really never worked with a female before, but there is a female that works at one of the shops in town, and you kind of wonder how she's being treated, right? Because males are not used to having a female around in those settings, right? And things can go awry very easily. That's probably the most politically correct way to say it, and I'm sure that you've experienced that too.
Countless times. It actually ties into how I ended up gold mining in the first place. But to touch on what Daryl said, you're right that, you know, there, at least until recently, and including now, that there haven't been enough women in trades. And when people ask why there aren't more women in trades. Visibility is just it. So I think it's great that a lot of these reality shows are bringing on women because, you know, as a little kid, my uncle had an excavation company and my grandfather on that side of the family did as well. But the boys got to crawl over the equipment and it was just sort of assumed that I wasn't interested. So I was never invited. But I watched Mighty Machines and had all the Tonka toys growing up. And that's what I was interested in. But for whatever reason, and maybe I never articulated it in my head, that was just not a possibility. Like, girls didn't run equipment, girls weren't into trucks. And so now I've received messages from dads who say, you know, my 8-year-old daughter watched you on TV this week and now she's asking me, does that mean that she can be an equipment operator? And I'm so thrilled that she got to see somebody do that. And that's probably what I'm the most grateful for to come out of the show, because I get a lot of other messages that aren't so great. And I'm sure a lot of women who do work in the industry still face exactly what I've experienced in that regard. So before I got into mining, I was working as a mechanic apprentice, and ignoring the financial issues of trying to find a shop that would pay me what I was worth, or at least a living wage, because as a first-year apprentice that had already done my first year of schooling at BCIT, I was still being paid less than the shop hand who had no experience while I was doing engine work and brake jobs independently, suspension stuff. You know, the shop hand was banging sockets off of the boss's Snap-on toolbox and getting like $5 an hour more than me. I was like, okay, this isn't right. And on my last day there, before giving my notice, I was under a vehicle and I was in coveralls, completely head to toe, not exposed at all other than from the neck up. And the guy who's supposed to be teaching me to wrench starts choking on his water or something. And I was like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, you have a really great body. I was like, oh, all right, cool. And it sort of hit me there that, you know, every time I was asking a question, it wasn't being answered. You know, if I wanted help, instead of being helped and shown how to do something myself, he would sort of take over as if he needed to be like close to me and was always trying to brush up against me. And I was like, this is just weird. And I pretty soon realized that I wasn't going to go anywhere with that company. So I was complaining to another mechanic friend of mine who was a Red Seal. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't afford to live where I live making this wage. I'm not going to learn anything, so I'm never going to make it to being a fully ticketed mechanic. And then his best friend was working for Parker, who I ended up working for on the show. And through them, I got the job and started in a rock truck and then moved up from there. But, you know, even at Parker's and in other jobs I've worked at since, you know, I've gotten all the inappropriate comments and I mean, just as many comments saying that women are nicer on equipment. You know, they're trying to have more female operators because,
nice.
We don't push it past the breaking point. And when something does break down, we notice, we can let the mechanic know and they can order the part before the machine is completely unable to move dirt. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of work to do. And I've tried over the last several years to observe what the major differences are. And I'm hoping that, you know, if I can continue to grow the social media following, and I'm still trying to figure out how exactly I can deliver these points, at least on a larger scale. I think there are things that are different about men and women that, especially in the workforce, that like behaviors socially that make understanding the other pretty difficult.
And not only socially, but primally. Like within your DNA, it's different. Yeah. I mean, I could get right into that and get really inappropriate with it, but I know what you're saying.
That actually ties into a book I could recommend.
Oh, really?
Save it for the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of hurdles there just in what you said with trades in general. I think that trades in general are tough to get into for both sexes because the living wage. I've got young friends that have tried to pursue a trade. The problem is the first 3 years of that trade just kill them financially.
Absolutely.
They can make more money delivering pizzas. They can make more money, taking a basic job at Walmart. And it's unfortunate that we don't have a focus on trying to get people into trades and paying them enough that they can pursue that trade. Because as a tradesperson myself, we do have a shortage of trades to come up in the fields. And so I think you add in the, possibly the female aspect of it, where they're intimidated to get into the trade, not only because of the wage problem, but then also the fact that they're a female in this trade, and now they've got to, overcome that hurdle too. And I think that all of the industries that are involved in, whatever's a male-dominated industry, construction and, even your basic trades, I think that they have had a heavy focus on trying to change that culture to encourage people, all people, because I think that there's such a shortage that, and you know what, generally as a nation, I think we've had to start changing how, our workplaces have gotten softer, and they've had to. I mean, when I worked drilling rigs 28 years ago, and I'm dating myself here a little bit, but 28 years ago when I was on a drilling rig, it's totally different than a drilling rig today.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to, because, people aren't as accepting of being yelled at or being demanded to do things. People want a softer approach. They don't want to be yelled at. They want to be asked. They want to be shown. And I think that just culturally, we've changed that way, where it's a softer culture, where it used to be, you just get things thrown at you and yelled at, and you had to go do the job and try and figure it out. And when you didn't do it correctly, you'd get yelled at again. And that's how they thought that you had to learn. So I think culturally too, we've had to change. And I think there's a lot of work still to do within the industries, but I think that they're getting there. And I think that your advocacy by showing that you can do these jobs clearly are resonating with people, because we see this a lot more social media wise, TV. We see a lot of women doing jobs where you're like, wow, she's doing that job where I've never seen a woman do that job before. And I think it's great to see.
I think a lot of what you're saying comes down to just having respect for somebody as a human.
Yeah, just be a good human.
You know
I mean,
if
people just started.
You don't need to throw tools at people to get your point across. You can do that.
Those days are gone.
By speaking to them like a human being, right? Mm-hmm. And it's awesome that you get even to be on a show like this, where people can see, because in a way your Parker and the crew and the guys on that show are almost being forced to respect you, because they're on a public platform where they can't, and whether that they did or didn't respect you and that got edited out is a different thing. But what the public sees is that they're not treating you that way for the most part, right? And that's what the public needs to see in order to make that cultural change.
You're right. That I never thought about that, but when you see somebody like Parker who's shown to be particularly tough on his employees, and in his defense, I actually found that he's significantly kinder in person than what I've seen edited on the show. Mm-hmm. I haven't watched a lot of episodes. I admittedly don't watch a lot of reality TV, and I haven't had cable for years, so I couldn't if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But Parker was always really fair to me, and I mean, I didn't run rock truck very long before he moved me up into a loader, and I wasn't able to move up much farther than that. And I don't think that was because I was a woman so much as some other dynamics going on behind the scenes. And I mean, partly I think it could have had a little bit to do with the difference in behavior between the sexes. It wasn't that I couldn't move up because I was a girl, but I wasn't throwing a tantrum about it. There were some guys not on the show. Parker had a much bigger crew than what was shown on TV. All the miners do that are on the show. And, there were some that demanded to run a certain piece of equipment or they weren't going to do anything. And, when we were short-staffed, that got accommodated.
Yeah.
So I understand, especially at the end of a season when there's a hard push, that you've got to do what you can to keep butts in seats and keep the dirt moving.
Yeah.
But that ultimately was why I ended up leaving. I had offers from a few other mines that were able to offer me the growth opportunities that I wasn't going to get. Aside from that, though, Parker was incredibly approachable, and I knew that if there had been a serious issue regarding harassment or abuse from anybody on the crew, that he would have taken my side and been really good. Unfortunately, I didn't have the guts that I thought I did to stand up for myself, because by the end there were a couple people who weren't being very fair, and it's frustrating for me because if it had been happening to anybody else, I know that I have no problem standing up for other people, but for some reason I don't think I deserve that. So definitely something I've worked on.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We just recorded a whole episode about imposter syndrome that you'll hear on Friday. So,
And I think that that's standard in that industry. I worked in construction for a number of years as well. And I think that the mentality there is, I've worked my way up to running a dozer and nothing smaller than an 8. And that's when they come onto a crew, they're like, that's my 8.
Yep.
So I think that's fairly standard in that, at least what I've seen, and I've been on a lot of crews. And they were fairly fluid because you'd send guys to other jobs that were specialized to do something. But when they show up at a site, they don't want to go, if they're a dozer operator, they don't want to run a rock truck.
Which is totally fair.
Sure, certainly. I've also found that the best hands that I ever had when I had to run a crew were guys that they would jump out of their hoe if they had to and go run a rock truck for a day because the crew needed that. And those guys always were the ones that you watched because they're the ones that are going to be foremen. Those guys are going to be, have their own company one day because they have that mentality that I've got to work with the team no matter what the team is.
Whatever
and if
it
something
takes.
needs to be covered, you cover it.
yeah.
So, I mean, that I think it's fairly standard. I think it's fairly standard in a lot of industries. Just that one in particular is fairly tricky. Like road crews, I had lots of guys that would run a dozer for the day, but they wouldn't grab a track spade and clean their tracks at the end of the day. That's not my job. I run controls. That's what laborers are for. They can come and clean my tracks. So, I was also on crews where if they wouldn't clean their tracks, they'd let their tracks freeze. And the next day they'd come to work and their machine wouldn't work because it was froze. So, I mean, sometimes you get the opportunity to teach people tough lessons and, they would just get mad and leave and go home. And you'd have to find another butt for the seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think pride is
Certainly. Yeah.
a big personality trait. We had people coming on who even on their resumes would say, I can run every piece of equipment you have better than every guy you have.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the standard in the heavy equipment industry. I can't count how many guys came onto the crew who didn't make it a week. Either they quit or got fired because they came in with this mentality of, I don't need to learn anything.
Yeah,
I'm better than everybody. And I only run this.
Mm-hmm.
And, their first 12-hour shift, they'd be complaining about what was expected of them. And I agree with you that the people to watch are the ones who will jump in anything.
They'll do anything.
And I want to clarify, I don't think you were implying this about me at all. But, I want to be that person who will hop in anything for a day. My problem was where I spent my winters learning to run excavators so that I could be more of an asset to a crew. And there would be somebody who had been on the crew for a much shorter amount of time and had done some things that I can't talk about, but that in any other world they would have been fired for.
Mm-hmm.
And they got moved from a loader to a dozer at the end of the season, and I was put back in a rock truck.
Yeah.
And that's where I drew the line for myself. And I was like, you know what? You have other offers where you would run excavator and dozer full-time, which is what I've done full-time for the last 2 years. All I've run is excavator and dozer. And, I wouldn't have gotten to learn and be as proficient as I am in those machines without leaving. So, just as there's an issue with getting people into the trades, because, even without the wages being a problem, nobody will hire anyone less than a third-year apprentice. I have several friends who they could take the pay hit if they had to, just because they want to learn, but nobody will give them the chance. Every ad says 3rd year or higher is what they want. So when you can't find those people, I don't know if they're ever going to start looking at the 1st and 2nd years who have the work ethic to be just as valuable as a 3rd year who maybe has some entitlement over what they're going to do or not do. I know mechanics who think they're too good for brake jobs.
Right.
Yep.
And that's where a keen 2nd year would be a real asset to a team. But, I read recently that in order to fill all of the open trades positions in Canada, we need, I don't remember the number for sure, but it was something over 200,000 to 400,000 new apprentices over the next 5 years to fill all the vacancies in every trade across the board. And that's never going to be filled if we don't get more women in trades and if companies don't start training people up.
Yeah. We just need more young people in general in trades. For sure. We need more of the population to look at it as a viable thing to do long term.
Oh, when I was in school, I think the mentality has changed, but it was kids who got A's went to university, kids who got B's went to college, and C's got into trades, and you were a failure.
Yeah.
I never even considered trades just because I got higher grades, but the people who I know who are successful in trades are making way more money than the people with master's degrees.
Yeah.
Trades are an excellent place to pursue opportunity.
Yeah.
And there's a certain ebb and flow in the workplace, in any workplace, where, like you were saying, like I understand both sides of this. It's appreciated to have somebody on the crew that's willing to hop into any piece of equipment and just get the job done, and that makes an excellent employee and eventually maybe their own business owner. I also can appreciate that you've put in the work and you've done your time operating a piece of equipment that is below your pay grade, and then to be put back into that piece of equipment once you've surpassed that kind of milestone in your career would almost maybe feel like a slap in the face.
It absolutely did.
So, like, I get both sides of it, right? Like, once you've put in your time, and in the workplace, you have certain positions, I can say this confidently as a business owner, that you hire out, right? Like, I'm not going to hire somebody at $20 an hour to clean toilets, right? Like I hate the term below their pay grade, but there are other people in the workforce looking for that kind of work who would take a lesser wage for that because maybe they're a student or maybe they're, whatever the situation is. There are different pay grades in our country for a reason. And there are other countries where that's not the case, where everybody gets paid the same no matter what they do. So I just think it's important to note that, both sides of the story are equally as important, I think.
Well, and I think it's obvious that that you were in the trade before you got on the show. So this question is kind of based around that, but also based around your exposure from the show. So being on those 4 seasons of Gold Rush, did the experiences that you got during that time advance you in your career, or did it hinder you? And what were those experiences like that moved you ahead? Like what part of that led you to where you are today or where you're going tomorrow?
I think it absolutely advanced me. One, because I actually didn't have true equipment operating experience before being on the show. That's why I started in a rock truck. I was hoping to actually become a heavy duty apprentice, but long story short, I couldn't find a shop to sponsor me to go into the apprenticeship program. So operating was always supposed to be a temporary thing until I could get into the trade I actually wanted. But Parker moved me up from rock truck to loader so quickly that I actually ended up enjoying it more. I did run farm equipment though, so I did have experience in bigger machines. I've been around horses since I was 10. They're a big part of my life. So, running tractors and doing kind of farm maintenance helped me a lot, at least to not look like a total idiot my first few weeks there. But past the show, the work ethic and the the eye for productivity that was instilled working for Parker has been invaluable. Like, you have to always be looking for something to do. You can't be caught not doing anything, you know, even if it's just bringing dirt closer to you for the next truck coming so that, you know, you load them 10 seconds faster than you would if you had just sat there waiting for them to come. Wow. You know, that can really help you stand out from
Cycles
other operators. Absolutely.
Cycles per hour.
Yeah.
That's wild that Parker's kind of got that figured out at such a young age, or maybe learned it from, was it his grandpa?
Yeah. So I think his parents own a road building company, do they not?
They sold it, but they
sold it, but they did.
Yeah.
So in any time you're moving dirt, it's about maximum efficiency. Any business, really. But when you're moving dirt, it's about having if your dozer is running with a half full blade, you're not moving enough dirt. So it's about maximizing every motion, because you're still going to burn the same amount of fuel. So I think some of the most successful pipeline company owners that I know, road construction owners I know, and clearly Parker picked up on this too, is they're born into that industry and they understand what it takes to make money doing that, because sometimes there's not a lot of money in it. I've seen lots of road companies go broke trying to move dirt because they just don't know how to move dirt. So I think that, you know, for him, he had a huge advantage coming into that because he was born into it.
He did, but he also had the wherewithal to bring in outside help. Ken Tatlow's an example. He would take Ken out to the cuts, and Ken had been mining for decades at that point, and Parker bought some ground off of him. I believe he leased it. But he would go out and walk the cuts and ask what Ken's opinion was and how the most effective way to move that dirt was. You know, he would talk to miners who had been doing it for a lot longer than him. He never thought he was better than anybody else. But when somebody suggested something that he knew didn't work, he would, you know...
He would say it didn't work.
He would respect their opinion and say, sorry, we're going to do it this way. And, you know, I witnessed that multiple times. We had a couple guys who felt that they knew better than Parker. And, you know, maybe in some instances they did, but they would do it their way, and Parker would come down and he'd be rightfully upset. Or, you know, he'd say, you know, why was it done this way? I wanted it done this way. And... you know, then you would see the consequences of not doing it the way that we were told. And, you know, that was where I also learned good communication was not directly, but I watched the disparities of communication between Parker to the foreman to people on the crew who were, I guess, unofficially above me in decision making on a day-to-day basis. And you know, it really showed when all of us were in line with what the goal was for that area that we were working on or that cut, and when there was huge discrepancies. And a big thing was with Parker was not moving dirt twice if he could help it. And that's something that I really wish that I could bring to the mine I've worked for the last couple of years. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this.
No.
Or maybe he does, and he's like, well, maybe we got to quit moving dirt twice.
Yeah, in my defense,
it only pays once.
Yeah.
That's right.
Moving it a second time costs you money.
Yeah, in my defense, you know, he sought me out and he asked me if I was interested in a job, I think because he wanted the experience that I got from Parker's. And
so then the show has given you some opportunities that you may not have gotten if you hadn't have been spotted on the show.
Actually, and other than the company in Summerland that I currently work for and would like to stay on with long term if I can make it work financially, nothing against them, but mining is 84 hours a week and I only work 40 hours a week down here, and Penticton is expensive. Yeah. But other than them, every job I've gotten has been because the person who hired me knew I was on the show, and I'm not proud of that, because the amount of resumes I sent out every winter for jobs like that were ignored was just, it was embarrassing. I've never not gotten a job until I was in the equipment industry that I applied for. And I was really lucky that just through networking, which is a skill that I've learned to grow and really appreciate, you know, I in each new place that I lived, whether it was on the coast or Quesnel and now the Okanagan, if I hadn't met someone who knew someone who was looking for somebody who knew me from the show, I wouldn't have had those jobs. And now I think because I've had those jobs, I have enough on my resume other than just working at Parker's who, you know, if I just go by his company name, no one knows. Like I would have been better off putting on my resume, worked for Parker Schnoebel. Yeah. But instead I was putting the name of his mine because I thought it was tacky to be like, oh, hi, I was on a TV drop. Show.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I wasn't able to be taken seriously. So I also debated having a typo in my resume and having Brian instead of Brianna and seeing if I got more calls, but I never ended up trying it.
Yeah.
You know, I think it says a lot about who you are as a person that you aren't that person that's just like, hey, I was on a TV show, so hire me, right?
I will admit it if someone asks, but I will never come forward with that info. It just seems just embarrassing.
It's kind of a different approach to getting what you want in life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Kind of similar to like sleeping your way to the top. Like just using somebody else for your benefit feels kind of icky.
I think there's a time and place to name drop.
For sure. Yeah. For sure.
You know, like if that person says, oh, hey, go talk to this guy and tell him you talk to me.
Yes.
There's where the name drop comes in.
Yes.
You know, and I get that quite a bit. And I also refer people that way. Let them know when you get there, you were talking to me and I sent you, because then they know where it came from. And then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we know Daryl or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I also didn't want to publicly put down who I worked for because I thought I was going to get calls just so people would be able to get his number when I gave him as a reference.
Right.
So, you know, I didn't need fanboys like giving me a chance only so they could get his number. And call him
the other side of this I wanted to touch on too was, do you think that working at that mine was possibly a hindrance down the road? Because when you do put that out on a resume, is there, say, a mine or another company that is wanting to hire somebody for that position you're applying for, say, okay, well, maybe we don't want that much exposure. Maybe we don't want, you know, that sort of angle. You know, maybe they're a little bit more private, or they just don't want that sort of exposure. You know what I mean? Like, do you think that there's some of that possibly has happened?
I think it's possible. I've definitely considered it. And the mine I've worked for the past couple years, you know, he's asked me not to give the location of the creek we're mining on.
Right.
Mostly because we get bigger gold than what Parker got. He got, people on Indian River primarily find fine gold, and we got chunky nuggets. We got 70% nuggets to 30% fine gold.
That's crazy.
And there's only 3 people on that creek right now with a lot of open ground. So if people start seeing on my social media all these nuggets, you know, we're going to get people coming in. So we're very private about the location and even the company name, because the Gold Rush fans are quite resourceful and they will go through the mining records on the Yukon government websites and find out where people are and who's got water licenses. And so, I mean, I don't think I was a big enough person on the show that anybody's really thought that I would bring too much exposure. There were certainly main characters on the show. I wasn't in every episode, and I really wasn't shown much until season 9, more in season 10, but season 7, 8, you probably only see me if you're looking, even though I was there. But yeah, that is a possibility, not one that I think hindered me as much as maybe my name being female, and you know, just that I only had that one mine for experience, which probably looked a little suspicious, being my only equipment operating on there.
Yeah, and it is hard to, you know, it's always that age-old argument that, you know, we want to hire someone for experience, but then the person sitting there applying is like, well, how do I get that experience?
Yes.
So I've got to get my foot in the door somewhere.
That vicious circle.
It is. Yeah. And I think that the other problem for a lot of people is when they get into something too, they want to start someplace big or start at the top or whatever. There's a lot of entitlement when it comes to getting into the workforce too. So, you know, sometimes it's a gut check for people to have to start smaller than they really want to, you know, and I think that some of the industries have certainly promoted, you know, a lot of wealth. And I think it's easy to watch that show and go, oh yeah, I could do that. I could go lease a bunch of equipment, get a bunch of my buddies, we could go up to the Yukon and we could strike it rich. And how many people go through that and end up blowing their entire life savings and they have nothing?
You can do everything right and end up dead broke because you do not know what's in the ground until you pull it out. And I mean, Parker was lucky enough that Indian River is just, it's really profitable, especially when you know what you're doing. But there were areas that we mined that, you know, were paying less than an ounce per hour. And, you know, typically he was happy if we were getting 3 ounces per hour. And I mean, it all depends on your operating costs. You know, we were, where I've been mining, we thought like an ounce an hour was great because we weren't spending nearly as much fuel. We moved dirt a lot differently and didn't use trucks or loaders. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of people who, you know, the show's been romanticizing the idea of gold mining for them. And they do go up there. I know of a couple who have asked me to come be on their crew, and I felt really bad because number one, I couldn't take the risk of not being paid, you know. Yeah. Like you said, they're not just the wealth of being a mine owner, but I think people think that anyone who works on those gold mines is making like oil sands or pipeline money. And you're not. The going wages there are, you know, they've gone up over the years with inflation and other wages going up. But, you know, the average wage I'd say now is between 28 to 35 an hour, depending on how experienced you are. And, you know, people are making 45 to 65 out in the oil sands or pipelines. So
pipeline is good money.
It is, yeah.
So I get hundreds of messages from people. I'd say some are asking for jobs. Most are demanding, which again, I think is a weird personality trait of equipment operators. They're just, I'm the best damn dozer operator on the planet. Hire me. I was like, oh, you could have started with how are you? But I'm not going to forward your info. Thank you, though.
So obviously you have a social media following. I don't know how many followers you have today,
like 29,000 or something like that.
Yeah, which really isn't very much.
That's no joke.
Well,
that's no joke.
I mean, I've only got like 28,000 and
stop.
I think I got like 800.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously with this podcast being Hip Ways to Do Business, clearly with your social media presence and following, you can advocate for women in trades, but is there a way for you to use that in your daily business to promote yourself or a product, or have you dove into those areas of trying to you know, profit from your influence? Because we see that a lot. We see a lot of people using their influence to clearly make a living doing it so that they can afford to continue to influence. And whether it's good or bad, you know, I prefer to see obviously good, but.
So it is something I've considered, and I guess I have a bit of a guilt complex around it, because anytime I've seriously considered trying to use my social media following to make money, I back out of it immediately because it just seems gross.
Bit dirty for you.
Yeah.
To like I get suggestions from people being like, do a photo shoot of you posing with equipment and sell calendars, like, you know, because I mean, my horses are trying to kill themselves almost daily and have cost me thousands in vet bills recently. So I'm like, how can I try to get out of this hole? And my friends are they just say exploit, you know, the fans of the show. And I'm, you know, as much as I do acknowledge that would be a possibility, it doesn't line up with my values. So I don't think I could do it. But I have really wanted to try to do something, whether that was partnering with a clothing company, which has been looked at. I don't really know what's happening with it. We were supposed to start a clothing line celebrating and promoting women in mining. And yeah, I don't know if it's on hold or just maybe not as important now that I'm not on the show. I think that was a big part of it.
I'm not going to say names and I'm not going to say brands. But there certainly has been a presence of some fairly prominent brands on the show.
Yep.
So obviously there's some sort of connection there. So clearly it is a formula that works. So, I think that you're right, though, is stick to what you align with. Going back to our episode a couple of episodes ago about aligning yourself with something that you believe in and that you are confident in, because you'll put the effort in to make sure that it's, it works, right? And it doesn't make you feel dirty at the end of the day because you're just pimping out someone else's clothing so that they'll pay you or whatever it is.
Yeah, so what I've done a lot of is small local companies, or especially ones that are family owned, who aren't, mass producing whatever's popular. They'll ask me if, I want to do a post of their stuff, and I haven't charged. They send me a couple free hoodies or shirts, promoting their brand, and I'll do a post for them. I'm getting free clothes, and they seem like a good, hardworking company. I'll gladly promote that. And then I've been approached by...
Careful what you say on this podcast, because people are listening. You're probably going to get a bunch of phone calls after this.
Oh, to wear their stuff?
Yeah, to promote people's stuff.
And you know what? I'm guilty, because I send some of my apparel to...
I do it too.
Yeah, I send it out so that they will try it on, make a social media post, because it works for me to try and get traction with what I'm doing, but then they get free whatever I send them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it can be, you got to do it right. I think that to make it dirty is just always going to be dirty.
It really is like a very hip way to do business.
Well, it is cross marketing with even with competitors.
Yeah.
I mean, I started cross marketing with competitors when I was selling real estate. I would share other realtors' posts, share their listings, and people were like, why are you sharing like this other realtor's stuff? And I was like, because it's getting me traction too. My followers are going to see it. They're going to call me because they're loyal to me, or at least you hope they are. And then it gives me an opportunity to make money. And not to mention it promotes our industry. So it was less greed, but still greedy. But at the same time, it was just, and now you see everybody doing it. I see tons of competitors in my side industry that promote each other constantly. And I think it's brilliant business. So, even on the show, like you said that, Gold Rush certainly romanticizes gold mining, but you see Tony and Parker interacting, but they're really at the end of the day promoting each other and promoting the industry. And then there's a competing show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Have you ever seen it, Bree? The other show that's about gold mining up there? I think it's called Yukon Gold.
Oh, I thought that was canceled a few years ago.
It was, but when it was on, it was almost like Gold Rush was the romantic side of gold mining. And then Yukon Gold, these poor buggers were all going broke and they had cancer and they had arms falling off. Like it was just a totally different take on the gold mining. And it was maybe a little bit more realistic for the average person that thinks they're going to get into gold mining.
That's a really good way of putting it.
It's neat how everybody was cross marketing, and people don't even see it, but you can see that they're cross marketing.
Yeah, like the all publicity is good publicity. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Dale Earnhardt used to say that, and he used to, if you're a NASCAR fan, and I used to be, he would say that. They'd ask him, "Oh, all these fans are booing because you wrecked so and so for the win," and he would just look at the camera and go, "I'd wreck my own mom to win a race." And then they'd be like, "Well, don't you think this is bad publicity?" And he's like, "No, publicity's publicity. They're talking about me right now." Like he just didn't care, and he was that brash about it. They're still talking about me.
Yep.
So it's kind of neat how all that marketing sort of intertwines and
yeah.
It does make sense because, now that I think about it, when I see companies advertising for who I believe is their competitors, I think more highly of them. I'm like, that's a very human thing to do. Like, good for you, not being cutthroat. And and I'll choose bands that I'll take, or not bands, brands that I'll accept offers like that from because, their values look like they align with mine. Mm-hmm. There have been bigger companies that have offered me payment for doing the photos, and I was trying to figure out after that, I was like, okay, so if I accept payment, I need to accept payment from everybody from now on, because
you're setting the standard.
Yeah, it's not fair for some companies to pay me and others not to. And apparently I didn't do the photos right, because they, time and time again, I submitted photos to them and they were like, oh, can you do it this way? Or can you get it closer up, or do this, do that? And I think I sent them like 35 different photos, and I hate every photo ever taken of me, but none of them were right. And then they just stopped replying to the emails. So I was like, okay, do I send back the product? Like, I don't know what to do. They sent me all of like maybe $50 worth of stuff. So, so that part's hard, because I feel like I have to do the best I can at any point, and selfies don't work for stuff like that. And when I'm on the mine where people really want me to represent their products, I don't have access to a photographer. I work with a bunch of dudes who, couldn't take a good photo of their girlfriend if you paid them. And, I would like to do more of that, especially if it benefits other brands. I think I can make it work for myself if I think I'm helping someone else. I couldn't do it just for me. But yeah, I need to find like a good photographer to follow me around and just take photos. But if I was to really focus on trying to make money off of the social media, I would like to do some sort of scholarship that can help a woman get into trades.
I was just going to say, like, you sound like the kind of person that could use your, for lack of a better word, fame for good.
For a lot of good, probably.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, even the little bit of fame that, there's a small group of us that kind of interact quite a bit. We always try and do something with what we're doing to try and benefit our community.
Right.
So, it always... And I don't know, like we touched on it in a couple episodes ago about how that, you got to do it for the right reasons, otherwise it's self-serving. So I think that, the best work we do is work that's quiet. We don't brag about it, right? So I think it's easy to see on the surface when people are doing stuff, but then a lot of times you don't have a clue what they're doing behind the scenes. So, you have that opportunity, and I think that your brain works similarly to, the group I'm talking about, where you're always looking for that in to try and help someone else, because my success is their success and their success is my success. That kind of attitude.
And I think there's a lot of situations where, especially for someone with somebody like you with the following that you have, where, maybe you're giving a coffee to the guy sitting outside of Starbucks who's freezing. You don't need to put that on your social media, right? Like, that's just something that you do because you're a good person. But when it's something bigger, like what you're talking about with a scholarship, that warrants putting on your social media, even if it maybe feels a little gross. But it tells people who you are. Right? Like that. For me, getting to know that about you, it just makes me want to hang out with you that much more, because you're a good person, right?
Well, it gives you an opportunity to show people that you're human.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't have a problem posting about that. It's more that I don't know how to make the money to do that. I wish I made the money that the people who watch the show think I make, but I don't. And
you're now friends with people who know how to do marketing.
But I feel like there needs to be a product to sell to raise the money, or I don't remember what website it is, but people pay celebrities to do little personalized messages and shout outs. I've debated doing that so many times, and then I'm like, you are not famous enough to be nobody's going to pay even $5 for you to record a message.
I doubt that. That little girl that watched you on the show and wants to run equipment wants a message from Bree.
See, but I don't want to charge that little girl.
Well,
I want to charge the middle-aged man.
You're charging her parents. She doesn't have a credit card yet.
Her parents would feel so good about paying you to, I would hope, to do something like that. I know I would. I would pay for that service for my daughter, for sure.
Maybe it's something I need to look at again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think you're
you have all those opportunities. I mean, we're not trying to tell you how to make money. It sounds like we are here now. It's like, what can we get Bree to do today?
That's naturally the kind of people that Daryl and I are as well. Like, when somebody has a problem, we want to help fix it, right?
Oh, and it
not
shows,
saying that you have a problem, but
No, I see what you guys are saying, and I really appreciate it because, you know, you guys are probably right. The issue here is me.
it's your imposter syndrome. You have that.
Yeah.
I can see it all over
to
you.
me, if you don't have several 100,000 followers, you're still a nobody. And
Yeah.
I'm not on the show anymore, so it feels very gross to exploit
show,
anything that's come out of that.
Sure.
You know what? When I look at your social media now, there's nothing about the show on there. It's
No, I don't
almost
think I've ever
all
even
like
named it.
images of your horses and you living your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be losing followers if people didn't want to see that. So people are now invested in you as a person,
Mm-hmm.
not so much Bree from Gold Rush. Right? So
I am losing
You're-
followers. I'm just gaining them at relatively the same pace, so it stays kind of even.
but that could also be because you're a very busy person and you don't have the consistency that Instagram requires people to.
Yeah, I think I
Gain
went a couple
followers.
weeks in between my last couple posts, and that's very much just if I had a photographer, like, and I would absolutely hire one to do photos that are relevant to what my followers want to see to try to keep that engagement up, but I cannot take selfies or anything like that. It feels very vain to be trying to get likes and comments just on a picture of myself. But if I'm running equipment or, you know, doing an activity, I have no problem with that. You know, if anything, what I think the most helpful thing I've been able to do with my social media, hopefully without sounding like I'm bragging, and you guys
You're
are probably
so
going to tell me
sweet.
that I'm not, so I'm just getting ahead of that. But I get a lot of comments, like individual comments and questions, and unfortunately I cannot respond to all of them. They have slowed down, so it's a little easier now. But, you know, sometimes people ask me very legitimate questions, and I'm a really open person, so, you know, I've been open about the fact that I had a severe concussion the year, actually, I started for Parker. And I did a post sometime in the last couple of years about it and just kind of threw it out there, like, has anybody else had a TBI? And, you know, was there something that helped you recover from it and helped manage your symptoms? You know, this is what helped me. And I got a bunch of messages from men who are operators, particularly, who are like, you know, nobody's taken my concussion seriously. Like, people, especially because it's an invisible injury, people think that you're faking it or trying to milk it for attention, or EI or WCB, I guess. And, you know, it's been 4 years and I still get dizzy when I look at a screen or something like that. And I was able to give them advice that they found helpful. Or I'm really big on health and wellness, which is something very lacking in my industry. We sit on our butts for 8 to 12 hours a day. And, you know, sitting is the new smoking, as they're saying.
Oh.
100% is. It's so bad for you. And, you know, even if you sit all day, you're still tired at the end of your shift, even if it's mentally.
Yep.
And, you know, I've been able to give tips on how to stay a little healthier, you know, when you have a really sedentary job. So I've gotten a lot of fulfillment out of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's something I am still able to do. Whenever someone messages me, I try to offer them advice. But when they ask for a job, I just send them to a link to the series of posts I did on how to get a job mining, because I cannot respond to that anymore.
No, it's got to be overwhelming. The fame has to be overwhelming at times. Everybody wants to be famous until they're famous.
Until they're
right?
famous. Yeah.
And that's actually what bugs me, is I feel like people are asking for jobs not because they're truly passionate about gold mining. I'm sure there's been exceptions, and some I have kind of read their message and felt that they weren't asking because they want to be on TV. They're truly obsessed with gold mining. Yeah. And in that case, you know, I'll try to point them in the right direction as best I can. But a lot of people just say, I want to work for Parker, Tony, or Rick. And I'm like, okay, that just makes it seem like you want to be on the show. Mm-hmm. You know, these are resources you can pursue if you want to work in the Yukon gold mining. And, you know, maybe you'll end up on one of those crews. But I can pretty much guarantee you won't be on the show, even if you're on one of the crews. You know, there's 30 plus people on each of those crews. And, maybe less than 8, I think, are regulars in the episodes. So I'm a little put off by that, because being on TV was never important to me, and that's not why I was there. I didn't even know the show existed before I started with Parker.
Really?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Was that like a shock to you when they came to, like, how did that play out? Did they just one day come to you and be like, so we want you to be on camera? And you're like, what camera?
So everybody signs something when you first come on anyway, like basically an NDA, like you can't reveal stuff that happens in the season until it's aired, sort of thing. And like the gold totals especially, that's a big thing that people want to know before the final episode. And a waiver that says you're giving permission to be filmed, and everybody signs that because you could be in the background of a scene.
That's right.
And it gets cut into the show. Yep. They need that. So, but yeah, I only found out maybe a month before I went up there that the show was a thing, and I didn't think it was a very big show. Like, I was like, oh, it's just another one of those reality shows that's probably on maybe a Canadian local network that
Discovery.
Yeah. No big deal.
Not only Discovery, but Discovery's #1 grossing show.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's their top I mean, it could be different now, but when I was on there, it was a top show, and at one point at its peak, it was #3 in the world, only behind Game of Thrones and Walking Dead.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Which I did not believe, but it's not very big in Canada, even though it's filmed here.
Yeah.
But
huge in the States.
Huge in the States.
Massive.
And some European countries.
Yeah. Yeah, they really love it in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a lot of messages that I have to put into Google Translate.
Yeah.
A lot.
Oh, yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
So when you first started on the show, obviously you give up your summers to mine, and I'm doing air quotes on summers.
They get summer.
Well, yeah, but not like we get here. So you give up your summers, which is, obviously all the time that we love down here to go to the beach and do the things that we do. So what did your year look like? Like, you'd obviously go up there for 4 to 6 months and work in the mine, and then you come back to wherever you lived, and it was winter.
7 months.
7 months. So what did you do those other 5 months? Like, what did your year look like,
outside
for you?
of mining?
Yeah, outside of mining. Like, obviously you mined your summers away. So what did you do in the winter? Did you go and get another job? Did you travel? Did you just go buy more horses?
I did accidentally buy more horses.
Accidentally.
On accident, yeah.
Oops, here,
Oops,
take
sorry.
$10,000.
They were next to free in my defense because they were rescues, but they have cost me tens of thousands in
horses
the
aren't
last
cheap.
2 years. No, especially when they need the vet. So every winter I tried to get a job relatively quickly after coming home. I think one hindrance, like I talked about earlier, was just even getting an interview with any of the equipment operating companies. My priority was always to learn more because I didn't have the opportunity to run excavator at Parker's. So I was like, mining's just not a good place to learn because it is such a short season that all of the productivity is crucial. So, if you have a beginner on the excavator doing a quarter of the dirt moving that everyone else is doing, like, I understand that. So I wanted to learn. And yeah, I did always have the first couple months off because it would take me a while to network and meet somebody who recognized me and then got me a job with somebody. And I mean, at that point, I just took it because I didn't really have a choice. But scuba diving is one of my #1 outlets outside of horses and significantly less stressful than the horses. And so because my family's in Ontario, we try to go for a trip every winter. And typically that's the Caribbean because I haven't had a summer in 6 years. So, even though it does get into the high 30s for 2 weeks, maybe, and then the rest is cold up there, I go down there. I haven't been able to for the last couple of years, obviously, because of COVID. So that's been tough. But I think I've been to just about every island in the Caribbean, which I'm really grateful for. So other than that, I worked for another mine in Quesnel. I did a season of logging, a season of construction in Ontario. And I think last winter was off completely because of COVID, and I could not get anybody to hire me in Penticton. I applied everywhere and didn't get a single interview, so that was humbling. But I don't think people in the Okanagan watch it as much as they do in northern BC. But this year I was lucky. I got a job within a week of being home.
Yeah.
Which was a little too soon. I needed a little bit of time off to recover from those 84-hour weeks. And other than that, the big reason I moved to Penticton was I'm new into rock climbing. I love it, but I'm only home during the time of the year where you can't really safely climb Skaha Bluffs.
Yeah.
But the local gym in Penticton, Hoodoo, is amazing, and I love it there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
They're
So,
awesome people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
Shout
haven't-
out.
Yeah, shout out to Hoodoo Adventures
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
They were really accommodating, especially with my schedule. Earlier this year, I was working at a mine in Quesnel that was 2 weeks on, 1 off, and they allowed me to pause my membership when I was gone for longer periods, so that because I had paid for such a long chunk of time, they so that I could get the most out of it. They paused a couple of the long chunks I was gone.
Amazing.
Yeah, they didn't need to do
Amazing.
that, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're really
I've
great.
I've heard great things about them. I heard they're pretty
Yeah.
cool. They're pretty active in the community as well.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're involved with biking, and I think they've got kayaks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And they do a lot of community work.
Yeah, giving back. And,
Yeah.
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 Good people. I've met the owner who sits on the board of the volunteer center here.
Oh, yeah.
I don't, maybe not to this date, but at the time,
previously, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, great people. Happy that you found that, because that's a great resource for someone like you who's trying to get into something like that, right?
Yeah, and the climbers I met there, unfortunately my job made it really hard to actually pursue friendships with them. They were inviting me out to do things, and I was always gone working
Yeah.
during the time of the year where, people actually do stuff. And then,
I get that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, maybe I can still reconnect with them because they were awesome. And
Well, and normally our winters aren't like this.
oh, yeah.
Like you could have been like last year. We were looking through pictures last week because we were trying to figure out what the weather was like this year compared to last year. I was still riding. We hadn't had snow.
A motorcycle, not a,
We hadn't
not a
had
horse.
snow at this point, so I was still out riding. And not short trips. Like we were doing the Karamia sloop down to Osoyoos and back. I mean, we were riding.
Yeah, I think we only had a little bit of snow
Yeah.
at the end of December last year because I have a
And it
picture on a rubber
disappeared right
duck
away.
in a hot tub
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
snow on the,
Yeah,
on the ground. But other than that, yeah, it was great.
yeah.
This is an abnormal.
Yeah, just our
winter
snowfall
here,
this year.
for
So
sure.
I think a lot of the climbers typically would climb more on the bluffs. But yeah, this winter you just can't.
No.
So summertime's a great time to climb the bluffs too with the rattlesnakes. It's good.
How long have you been in Penticton?
Since November 2020.
Yeah.
So just before COVID hit. No wonder you can't make any freaking friends.
Oh, that was a year
Oh, no, that'd
into
be 2019.
COVID.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
your end of it. Just
yeah,
about,
that's right.
But yeah, like
But
when I'm
still.
only here for the winter, I just
Yeah.
made those friends at the climbing gym, and then I haven't been back there this year because I've got a kind of severe sort of, I guess it's an injury that I can't get dealt with because of COVID right now, and which is really frustrating.
Yeah.
But I've decided to defy the doctor, and I'm going to start climbing anyway because it's going to be over 2 years to see the surgeon. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
Atta girl, that's my approach
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Jeez. It seems like that's a pretty common theme around here, is any kind of specialty doctor
Yeah.
or surgeon is like a 2-year wait, or at least 2-year wait.
I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of our country right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was told it's about 18 months to 2 years for my initial consultation with the surgeon, and then it could be another 18 months to 2 years after that to actually have the surgery. So I could be looking at 3-4
Crazy.
years.
Won't affect work though, so that's good.
So far.
So far. So what's the future look like for you? Like what's your 1, 2, 5, 10-year goals? Like, are you going to continue with the mining? Do you have plans to try and branch out and do your own thing? Are you wanting to stay closer to home? where are you at in that? Because you're still pretty young, but you're close to 30.
I know.
You're just about over the hill, apparently.
Oh, God.
I think I'm only scared about being close to 30. I'm 28, because I thought I would have more accomplished by now.
That's
especially
the common
with
thing,
mining. Financially I should be farther ahead, but horses. And then having a lot of the winters off. I still have my living expenses, so that's a big part of it. So I think my main goals are to get financially ahead enough that I can actually stay in the Okanagan and buy a place, because that's getting pretty unattainable for just about anybody right now.
Yep.
So unfortunately, it is always a possibility that I do have to go back up north. And, I was able to move up into a foreman position this year. Or I guess last year. So, that's something that I don't have down here. And I would like to get more experience in a leadership role, especially being a woman. There are hurdles to that, and I have a small crew, so that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And they knew me for a year beforehand, but outside that, I really love the company I work for now, and I am hoping to stay there. I have some opportunities for side work that would give me enough hours on top of my regular full-time job up in Summerland that I could stay year-round. So I'm hoping that all pans out. And I think I'm considering going to school.
Wow.
And I don't know how possible that's going to be while working full time, but luckily there's a lot available online now.
Yeah.
So disappointing to people in trades maybe, but I'd really like to study psychology. That's always been my dream. And it just wasn't tangible because I didn't graduate high school until this year.
Oh, really?
A few months ago.
Nice.
Yeah. I left when I was 16 to work full time for reasons I won't talk about on the show.
Yeah.
And so I just never really pursued it because working in trades, I didn't need it. And it was every time I tried, it got impossible with the hours I was working. I don't think I've ever worked a 40-hour week until this year. And so yeah, when I was mining, I finally cracked down and did my last 2 credits and got that. And now all of a sudden, these other opportunities are available. So I was like, yeah, I might do that. But
I hate to admit this, but I graduated high school at 30. So
did you really?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't quite make graduation in high school, class of 93. Hello. Shout
so
out to
old,
Sexsmith Secondary School. I had some opportunities in front of me, and I had to have a high school diploma to take those courses and do that. So I had to suck it up and go back to school, and I challenged the 2 finals that I needed, and luckily I passed them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, at 30. So I was petrified. The most horrible part about that whole experience was going to the school gymnasium and sitting down there as a 30-year-old and looking around at all these kids, and these kids are looking at me like, I wonder if this dude's going to watch us in case we're cheating, or is he actually here? Like, who is this guy?
That's amazing.
Who's this nerd? And there I was writing exams right with them because I needed that diploma to advance myself. Luckily, when I got my trade, I was, at that time, I guess people call it grandfathered, because I had my grade 10. I had completed all my courses in grade 10, and I was an adult, so I got credit for being an adult, so I was allowed to go to trade school. And over the last 15 years, they've started to phase that out, so they want to see a high school diploma.
Yeah.
To qualify you for trades, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think we have to encourage people to finish an education. Like, it's a different world now. They're looking for credentials. They're looking for education.
It's hard to even get any sort of job without a grade. Like, even on the rigs, when I was working in that industry, it didn't matter if you had your grade 12. Now it does.
Yeah. Yep.
You have to graduate high school.
They want to see it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, it was my biggest regret, and that's why I'll talk about it here, and kudos to you for admitting that it was 30 for you, because...
you as well. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
And I felt the same way. I felt the same way. Like there was this unfinished thing that was going to hinder my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because, again, hope not to sound bragging, but school, at least the courses, came so easily to me. If it wasn't for my life outside of that, you know, it would have been a breeze to finish. I did all of grade 11 and grade 10, so I was lucky in that I only needed 2 courses to graduate, and I think that's why I put it off so long. Yeah. But I'm hoping that, you know, if somebody is listening to this who's like, oh, you know, I should go back and finish my high school, like, it's very possible, and you can do it.
Yep.
And, you know, I'll shout out to SIDES, which is South Island Distance Education. It's based on Vancouver Island. And I've tried multiple different avenues to try to finish my high school through different places in BC. And that was the only one that had the support system and the technology that made it doable. Yep. I got booted out of courses for not submitting work in time through other places. And, you know, there were weeks where I was working 84-hour weeks. So I'd miss submitting an assignment by a day, and they would boot me out of the course. And then all of the past few months I had done were gone. And they wouldn't let me restart, including the work I had done. So I just never touched it again. It's like, why would I pick it up if I'm not 100% certain that I can finish it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, SIDES made it very possible. And it was such a weight off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
I bet. And now, especially if you are considering going to school, you need that, right? Yep. For a psychology class, you definitely have to have graduated high school, right?
Exactly. And then I think my work experience, you know, there's such thing as organizational psychology. Adam Grant is like my hero in that regard, and that's basically workplace psychology. And the reason I want to study it is because of the differences I noted between men and women in the workforce. Communication is the big one. And I think if I could, you know, maintain my place in the trades industry and bring in a psychology education to that, I don't know how this would take form, but if I could somehow
like marry those two.
Yeah, and offer something, whether it's training for companies to, you know, more successfully integrate women into the workforce, and, you know, it shouldn't need to be done. But at the same time, like, you know, as much as I support gender equality, there are differences between us, and it's rooted in how we're raised. So, I mean, the number one thing I noticed is it's much harder to be heard as a woman, not because people won't listen to you, although that does happen, but because men will interrupt significantly more freely than we will, because we have been taught our whole lives to be the polite, more meek caregivers. And, you know, we give people the space to talk. And what I observed working on these mines with crews of primarily men, where if we had a tailgate meeting, the men are just shouting over each other. And I would try to say something and no one heard me. But I refused to interrupt somebody. I thought that was just unacceptably rude. But I didn't find it rude when another person did it. They were just, you know, it's just a free-flowing conversation. But I would not yell over somebody to get my point across. So my point was often never heard. And then it took a dinner conversation where we were always joking. We were a big family. You know, you live and work together. And someone said something. I made a joke. No one heard it, so no one laughed. And the guy beside me repeated my comment and got a laugh from the entire table. And I was like, you just stole my...
Yeah, stole your thunder.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I looked at him. He's like, speak up. And I shouldn't have just like shrugged and made a face with a microphone. Obviously, listeners can't hear me. Okay. But yeah, he just, and from that moment, I noticed that, you know, because we're trying not to be rude, we're not being heard. Yeah. So I
sometimes
think...
it's about finding your voice, right?
I think that's something that employers need to be aware of, that, you know, they need to create opportunities for their female employees to come forward and share what they think needs to change or anything like that. And because they're not going to stand up and have a temper tantrum about something in front of other people we're raised different.
It's true, and it has to start at the top, because even if a woman in any workplace is encouraged to speak up, oftentimes that can be viewed as, well, she's just being a bitch.
Yep.
Right? That is just, that it is what it is. There's no arguing that. It is starting to change, but the way to correct that is at the top.
Yep.
Right? Like, please take 5 minutes, talk about what you need to talk about, and then let's discuss what you talked about as a company or as a crew or as a whatever, a staff.
Yep.
And give you some validation. Like, not just let you talk and then move on to something else, but acknowledge that you are a human and you have the right to say something.
Yeah, or in a group meeting, you know, stop everybody. You know, typically there is one person in the group who, when they talk, everyone shuts up, and that's typically the boss. And you can point somebody out and say, like, Anna, what do you think about X?
Yes.
And because you, as the boss or the superior in that situation, gave them the floor, now they're going to be listened to.
Yes.
But, you know, when you're trying to have this, you know, I understand it can be healthy to just have this free-for-all conversation where everybody's talking because, you know, you want it to be this open-door policy that doesn't actually include everybody, even though it appears to. And, you know, what you said about women just being seen as bitches, that's another thing I've noticed is where we need more visibility is also women in positions of leadership, because just in our society and in the media, we don't see that enough. Like, for example, the Avengers movies, the character Nebula, obviously she's an antagonist for most of it until, spoiler alert, later on turns, you know, she's on the side of the Avengers, but I feel like everybody has seen all of the movies at this point. So I had a guy friend say that he couldn't stand her as a character. She was just too much. And I kind of poked and prodded, and to summarize, like, he actually agreed with me. I was like, you're just uncomfortable because she's a really strong female character. And she, you know, I pointed out other characters that were male in that franchise that are way more ridiculous than her and way more unrealistic and over the top. But because they were men, they weren't seen that way. And I know that sounds like super feminist and like I'm trying to find fault with the smallest thing and be offended by it. But, you know, my friend agreed with me. And it's just that we don't see strong women who hold their ground and defend their beliefs and anything like that in movies, TV shows, and particularly not in the real world.
Yeah, I agree. I happen to be friends with those very strong, powerful, and sometimes even bitchy women, right? My friend Holly admits that she is somebody who goes out of her way to pick a fight with somebody. She says that is in her DNA, it's part of her personality.
Yep.
But she's not the norm. Like you said, most of us are very much more timid and
more
mild.
Submissive.
And there you go. Yeah, that's a good word, submissive.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty typical role, though, honestly. Like, it's a generation. Well, it's not even a generational thing. It's just, you're right. It's
cultural.
Yeah, it's just cultural.
Yeah.
It is. And I mean, I'm absolutely guilty of it when I'm not in a position of authority, but when I am in the leadership role, I can change. And I admittedly don't become bitchy unless somebody is straight up disregarding me, in which case I'll be more firm. But, you know, you can combine the best of both worlds and be compassionate enough to not single somebody out in front of everybody. Yep. If you're going to reprimand them, you take them
That's right.
aside.
Kind of goes back to that. You know, we're trying to, you know, we're seeing a trend of softer workplaces in industries where they weren't before.
And I think that was long overdue.
Yeah. I mean, it's been coming for a long time. And I think that's definitely a generational thing. You know, as the generations get softer, not to pick on the generations getting softer, but clearly the last great generation was the Xers. But I mean, as the I just got a look from
think
Sarah.
The word soft is kind of rubbing me the wrong way here. I think the better word is more respectful. In a lot of cases, when I think of, I just heard somebody say the other day, we call them Okanagan soft here, because our winters are generally -12 is the coldest day of the winter, or minus 15.
Yeah.
I come from Saskatchewan. You come from Ontario. Our winters are not, in Alberta over here, our winters are not mild.
No.
So when I see people who have lived here their whole life be like, oh my God, it's minus 20. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm always just waiting for it to be minus 40. I'm like, when is winter coming?
Yeah.
Every day I'm like, well, maybe tomorrow it'll be minus 40.
I've always said, though, since I moved here, if it hits 30 below, I'm moving further south.
Yeah, there's a reason I picked Penticton.
Yeah.
I'm booking her south.
So that's what I consider soft.
Yeah.
Like, you're soft. You're used to a...
Yeah, I guess in that term, though, I'm like a
lifestyle.
softer, kinder, gentler workplace. Like, not... I'm just using soft as kind of a general...
That is a better
term,
explanation.
yeah.
I think
And that's what I mean
word,
by it, just a kinder, gentler workplace.
More
because
respectful.
you can't just ram into everything head on.
No, and I don't think it's productive.
People don't respond well to that. You know, at my age, I don't respond well to that anymore. At 20, I was okay with it. It was just the way the world was. But now, I just don't like it when people just ram into me. So it's, you know, I get defensive right away, and I'm like, whoa, we got to slow this down just a hair because this doesn't work. We're going to start a yelling match, and then that's not productive, and then feelings get hurt. And it just snowballs, right? So
and
a kinder, gentler workplace is, I guess, what I mean by softer.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
And I mean, that ties into what we're dealing with right now. You know, before I came here, I tried to get a coffee and they closed early because of a staffing shortage, which I know is affecting everybody. And I know there are a lot of people in the Okanagan. There's a radio ad in particular I can think of that is saying nobody wants to work, and that is not the case. Like, people are just not allowing abuse anymore. And I think that's 100% fair and acceptable because, you know, I find myself having very strong loyalty to my employers that treat me right. I get the idea of leaving is awful to me, even if I get offered a better opportunity. Like when I left Parker's, it terrified me because I was like, Parker's been so good to me for 4 years. He gave me all these opportunities. Like, I can't leave. It's not fair to him. And it took a lot for me to talk myself out of it and say, you need to do this for you. Because he treated me fairly, but I can leave in a heartbeat if I'm not treated fairly. There are always other jobs. And, you know, good employees need to be treated well, or if they're not necessarily a good employee, you need to look at yourself and think, what can you be doing differently in order to foster an environment where that employee can become a better employee? Because, you know, it's a saying that's repeated all the time. People don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And I've been working since I was 12, and you know, I think I've had more bad bosses than good. But the few good ones I had, if I could have worked there forever, I would have, just because I was that loyal to that boss. And, you know, the organizational psychology I talked about, and there's been a lot of proper research studies into thousands of companies, particularly the really big ones. It's proven that you get more productivity out of people who are treated well. Yep. And it costs a lot of money to train new people. Retention is the cheapest way to be profitable. So
catch more flies with honey than you do with shit.
On that note, I should, before I forget, talk about a code word. And maybe you guys can help me come up with a code word for this episode.
Oh, I thought this was something you like secretly inputted.
Oh, you know what? Use honey.
I was just going to say, do we use honey or shit? But
either one. Maybe both. Honey shit.
We've had alpaca, and then we had salty.
Oh.
And we actually had a bonus code word on the last one for a bonus entry. And I actually already forget what that one is.
Well, if you don't want to do honey, you can do a gold mining specific one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we had...
What about nugget?
Nugget is exactly what I was
Bree and I
going to
just hit
suggest.
it.
Okay.
It's like we share a brain right now.
Oh my God, Daryl.
So that's the code word, nugget.
We probably do, because tradespeople, like, we don't got a whole lot else going on.
No, that's right. I'm pretty simple.
I didn't mean that. Our jobs are just all encompassing our brain space and our bodies.
So I have one more question, not to derail what we were just talking about, but what is the coolest part about going up in a mine, and I also want to know what the worst part about living up in a mine is, just generally.
And
Cole's
before you
notes,
answer
quick.
it, can I just make it super clear that the code word is nugget?
It's
'Cause
nugget.
it was a
Yeah.
conversation and it kind of ended, but
Yeah, no,
okay.
the code word is nugget.
Okay.
Nugget.
That
Carry
was
on.
Daryl's fault for derail.
Yeah,
Always blame Daryl. Always.
yeah. I mean, that's what I'm here for.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So the best part about being up there was 100% the Northern Lights.
yeah.
I've never felt. The best way I can describe it is, if you haven't seen them before, is it makes you feel very small in compared to the rest of the world,
Yeah.
but at the same time special because you're experiencing it. So it doesn't make you feel small and insignificant. It makes you feel small and included in like the amazing world that we're a part of. So
And I agree. I've been lucky enough to be far enough north that the Northern Lights, like where I grew up, the Northern Lights are fantastic. And you can hear them at times.
Yeah.
The further north you go, the more amazing they get. It's truly that. It's just angelic.
Yeah.
It's like you're surrounded with something that you have no idea what it is, but you feel it.
I wonder
Yeah,
if there
it's very
is like
visceral.
some sort of component to these things at that level of intensity that actually is like all encompassing in your body. Like there's a physical reaction, like a magnetism or something to our bodies.
I think that experience though is so individual. Like for every other person, they would have a different feeling about it. But I've never seen anybody see them like that and been like, meh, they're okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's just like mouth wide open, staring up.
even if
there.
it's a bad night,
Oh,
they see one
100%.
ribbon of green and that's officially a day they'll never forget
Yeah.
until they've seen, you know,
and
proper.
they'll talk about it till they die.
Yeah.
And isn't
Yeah.
it, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it the case that the locals there just, like, it doesn't get old? Like, it's not a
never does.
novelty thing. It's just every night
Yeah.
that they go outside, it's this amazing fucking thing,
And
right?
it is one of the things I miss living here.
Yeah.
Because where I grew up, like you get probably 50 times or 60 times
Yeah.
through the winter where the Northern Lights are just so fantastic.
We'd
that
get them
they-
in Saskatchewan all,
They
the,
just blow
all
your
the time
mind.
too.
Yeah.
No, maybe
Yeah.
not at that level of intensity, but we still saw them a lot.
So what's the one thing that you don't like about having to go up north and for 7 months of your summer?
Yeah, not having a summer has been really hard. I have not been home for the summer in 6 years. And I think that's the hardest. Before you said that, I was going to say living and working with the same people for 7 months straight, you are not going to get along with everybody.
Yeah.
And
let's face it, camp life is a very unique thing in itself. I spent 20 years off and on in the oil patch, and it was a lot of camp life. And you either embrace it and try and find something that you enjoy about it, or you're just going to be miserable because you're going to work, you're going to eat, you're going to watch a bit of TV with whatever the guy in the room that's running the remote wants to watch, and then you go to bed. And it's lonely. It can be lonely. So you have to find something in camp life that you can grasp onto that you enjoy. Camp life is tough.
Yep, I just remembered the crew I've been working with the last 2 years. They've watched Game of Thrones all the way through at least 4 times in the past 2 years, twice this past season. And it just made me laugh because I remember I walked in and they had restarted season 1 and I was like, didn't you guys just finish it? And my one coworker was like, well, yeah, we just wanted to watch it again. And I was like, you really need to see your girlfriend more. Like it was, I was just like,
So
you guys are just trying to see boobs.
This is going to be the corny. Yeah, I just want to see boobs. This is going to be the corniest thing I'm going to say in the whole podcast. But when I was running construction crews, we had something that the entire crew did every week. And I don't remember what night it was because I'm not sure what night the new episodes of Gold Rush came on.
Tuesday.
Is it Tuesdays?
Yeah, in Canada it's Tuesdays.
Yeah, so Tuesdays, what we would do is the guys would come in from work. We would eat dinner together because we had a mess hall that we all ate in. And then when we were done eating, everybody would grab their dessert. And I kid you not, we all went to the TV room and we watched Gold Rush. And while the episode was on, nobody spoke. When the commercials came on, we muted it and everybody could chatter about how awesome that would be and stuff.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem corny at the time, but now that I'm sitting here with you and telling this story, it just feels corny. But it was a tradition that we did at camp because it ties into the camp life. It was something that we looked forward to doing together on Tuesdays that wasn't work. Our brains got an escape and the guys could just imagine what it would be like. Oh, we could run a crew and, you could run hoe and you could run the dozer and you could be the foreman and all we need is a bit of equipment, we could go. Like it was always this dream, but it was just a bonding experience we had with the 25 guys that were sitting there because we ate together and then we'd go and do that together.
Yeah, see, I don't think that's corny at all. And if
Well,
it makes you feel better,
feels corny. Yeah.
my crew watches Gold Rush,
Gold
the
Rush,
one
yeah.
I'm working on. And
Sure.
as soon as I heard the narrator, I would be like, nope, bye,
Yeah.
I can't. Or I'd hear my voice and I gotta go to my room. I cannot
It is
watch
hard
myself.
to get used to the sound of your voice. I could imagine the video is just a whole nother level.
Yeah,
of
there's one clip in
uncomfortable.
particular because I think Discovery would do snippets of episodes and put them on YouTube.
Yes.
So I haven't actually watched full episodes because I don't have cable, but I've seen the snippets that I've been in. The one in particular where a productivity analyst is brought in.
That's right.
I saw
And
that
I just
snippet.
die every time. I'm like, I cannot.
Because is that the one where Parker comes up and he opens up your the door to? Sorry, I don't know.
The
the
loader.
story. And he's like, you got to be faster, and if you can't, I'll put someone else in your place. And you're like, hee. That's the one I just saw recently.
I wish I could talk more about what was
Oh, yeah.
Way to
okay.
go, Sarah.
Yeah, shit,
Now
sorry.
it's awkward.
I can say that Parker didn't mean that. He was being lighthearted.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he did, and I could.
Yeah.
When I watched it at first, I was like, well, that was kind of jerky, but then I could see in your face, and I could tell by maybe the editing or whatever, but I could tell that you weren't actually like offended by that.
Yeah, anyone who's listening who
You were
thinks that
laughing.
we're all paid actors on that show, this is your proof. Like, Sarah could tell that
Yeah.
I was not offended because I'm not an actor and I
But
cannot.
also maybe because I have met you and talked to you, and I understand that, you're a good person. You weren't like, that scares me. You were like, nice joke.
Oh, if he'd meant
Right.
that, I'd like to think that I would have just walked away right there. But like I said earlier,
Yeah.
I have all these ideas in my head of how I would stand up for
And
myself.
maybe the character they portray on the show isn't exactly the character that Parker is.
It really isn't.
Because I've met Tony a number of times, and I feel like the person that they portray on the show isn't quite who Tony really is. And same with Minnie.
You look like you have your mouth zipped
Yeah.
shut right now.
It just,
Yeah.
I've gotten a different vibe from him, and Minnie for sure too.
Yeah, and I can agree that I believe they are different in person than
Yeah.
to the show, but I won't go further than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Fair
obviously
enough.
some character traits that carry through, but I just think that the editing makes it look a little bit different than maybe what they really are as human
Yeah,
beings.
and I really haven't seen a lot of episodes. I just know that typically I see a lot of comments on the Gold Rush pages and stuff because I'm still a part of those that talk about how much of a dick Parker is to his crews. And I mean, of course there are days, but I can honestly say that 90% of the time that Parker was giving somebody a hard time, it was deserved. It was because they were late or didn't show up.
Yep.
But maybe the show didn't
Or
portray
defied
the
'em.
true story.
Yep.
But there were also a couple times that he lost his temper at me where I can think of a couple where I did deserve to be reprimanded. I had made a mistake, and I don't agree that it's ever right to yell at somebody and belittle them or anything, and I don't think he ever really did that. But the couple times where he was unfair, he came down and apologized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like-
And of course they don't show that,
No,
right?
Yeah.
because I was on night shift.
But I think they've also done a good job of not losing the essence of who they are. Like, it's clear that Parker has a temper.
Yeah.
And he can be pretty hard on himself, and he internalizes it. And you see that very early on in the show when his grandfather was still alive. He would make a mistake, and he would get very down on himself and very internalized, but his outward appearance was, you could tell he was pissed. But he wasn't mad at anybody but himself. It just, he would bark at people. And he was quite young then. He might have been 15. So, I mean, you know, he was a young man. He was still in high school. And this is what he was burning his summers up doing, was working with his grandfather.
Yeah.
And Tony is the same. I think that, you know, they don't lose the essence of Tony as this focused, rough around the edges, you know, kind of gruff dude. But I think it's also part of his persona. I think it's part of what they've marketed him to be like, because, I mean, he looks like a gruff dude. You know, at the end of the season, he looks homeless.
Wow,
and then he gets a haircut and trims his beard down, and they show him in Mexico, and he's like, hey, come on in. It's like an episode of Cribs, him and Minnie in their crib. You know, so I think they try not to lose the essence of who they are, but I think the way that they edit it sometimes makes them look like someone they maybe aren't all the time.
Oh, absolutely. They edited an episode where it made it out that I smoked. And I remember being terrified that my mom was going to see that episode and call me up and be like, when did you start smoking? And it was just that they cut together a conversation where Brendan and I were kind of bantering back and forth, and we were quoting Step Brothers, which I thought was hilarious.
I thought it was pretty good, actually.
The British film crew didn't understand the references we were making and straight up said, like, you guys, you know, can you say something that the viewers are going to get? And we were like, the viewers will get this.
They're going to get
this movie. Yeah. But instead they pieced it together, and they have him basically say, like, it's like he's asking for something. He's like, lighter, smokes, let's go, or something like that. And I respond, so it makes it look like I have smokes to give him. Yeah. And I was like, that didn't happen. But you know, that is the problem with, there's, I think, 20 to 22 episodes per year. We're working typically mid-March to mid-October, and the film crew is there from early May to early October, filming 6 days a week. They're not going to show everything. And, you know, multiple days can be cut into one episode. So, you know, I think they do what they can with the footage to try to get the whole story across. But you're never going to see the full story of who somebody truly is.
Well, and I think that most of the general population understands that there is editing that takes place that makes it look, that doesn't tell the whole story. Yeah, I think, right?
And then there's people who get mad that we're wearing different hats.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
I think it was amazing when reality TV really started getting popular, and it kind of hit with like Survivor and stuff like that. It's kind of, and then there was MTV had a couple of shows that they had on. I can't remember what they were called, but I remember reading an article one time, and it was called the article was titled "Reality TV" with reality in brackets, because obviously, if you're filming somebody or a group of people, you need to sometimes create content. Otherwise, it's not very good TV. And so, you know, I know that there's shows out there where they will pay for trips so that they can get content, or pay for, you know, a project so they have content. So to call it reality TV in brackets has some truth in it. It just sort of, in my head, was like, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't all actual, right? And I think a lot of people get sucked into the fact that it's got to be true. It's got to be real. It's got to be exactly like that because it's reality TV.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do miss that part. You know, I see a lot of comments where, you know, Parker's in one truck and then another truck, or our clothing changed. And in our defense, you can have all 4 seasons in one day in the Yukon, so you layer, and you are going to change.
Yes.
You know, you can wake up and it's -10 and it's 20 by 2 p.m.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that is absolutely a normal occurrence up there. Yeah. So I do know exactly what you're saying. Like, so much happens and so much dirt is moved. Like, if you were to show one day's work in one episode, it would be mind-numbingly boring. Like, there are a couple D10s pushing up a ramp, and then there are rock trucks going around in circles. There is a loader taking a scoop and putting it in the plant, taking a scoop and putting it in the plant. And, like, it's just, you've got to, or it can take 3 days to fix something. Like, they've got to put enough interesting things that happened over a few weeks into one episode to make it
That's right.
something people actually want to watch.
And
But
they are in the business of making money too, right? Like they have to give people content that people want to see.
Totally. But it is real mining, and I've seen a lot of people say that this is a completely manufactured mine, like it's not a real mine, everything is fake and it's a set and we're paid actors. And I'm like, Discovery is a big network, and if they wanted to pay actors, they would pay better ones than us, because like I can tell when I see the snippets that I do see, like we don't sound like actors. We sound like people who are uncomfortable with the camera in our face. And,
right?
Like I'm absolutely one of them. I hear myself and I was like, I don't think I sound like that all the time. But
there's people out there who think that Australia isn't real. Like, have you seen these YouTube things? Like people are they'll just hang on to any.
There's also people that think the Earth is flat.
Yeah. And that birds aren't real, that they're like drones. Yeah, there's just...
I've got a sticker
people
that says
believe
they
in
aren't.
Stupid things. Yeah, if you have a sticker on your van, that means they're not.
I read it on the internet.
Yeah. But I think... So we're at an hour 44. I think that's a really good place to end the podcast, unless you have more things that you have on an agenda.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So we typically end the podcast with a book recommendation from our guest, or books, if you have. And if you don't want to do books, we can do TV shows or movies or whatever you want to do.
Oh, I love books. The only reason I've survived operating this long is because I listen to books and podcasts my whole shift, because then it feels like my brain is doing something. So the one I wanted to refer to earlier when we were talking about the differences between men and women, and you mentioned how we behave primally, there's a book called When Men Behave Badly, and I might have to quickly look up who the author is.
I'll find it.
And that one goes into the differences between the sexes and just how we're wired biologically, without making excuses for some of the more terrible things that men do. And this is not a book just attacking men.
Sounds like it isn't.
Yeah, When Men Behave Badly, yeah, it's a title that seems like it's grouping men together. It does point out many times where the majority of men are not, trying to prey upon women, and it sources or cites a bunch of really reliable studies and actually proves a lot of the stereotypes against men wrong, that mention like, oh, all men look at women as objects kind of thing.
Really?
So it's really well narrated and really well read, and I found it captivating the whole way through. So I highly recommend people listen to that if you want to learn more about what it would actually take for true equality, because it's much more difficult than what people think. Because, as much as we would like to think we're not, at the end of the day, we are raised differently and we are wired differently in some ways, particularly with our hormones. So that one...
Even written by a man.
Do you have the name of the author there?
David M. Buss.
Yeah.
And it's written by a man.
Well, unless I'm assuming his gender or their gender.
Oh,
First name's David.
It's a man.
Is it just B-U-S?
B-U-S-S.
Okay.
His last name.
That's how I wrote it. Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have more books?
Oh, I have so many books, but I try to only pick one of the best ones that I've read.
And just as a reminder, I will put links to these books to be purchased on Amazon on my website on the podcast tab. If anyone wants to buy them, we get a kickback.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
At the risk of being a little political, I also recommend Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. It's a really good alternative look at the drug pandemic and like addictions in particular. I fully believe that we need to completely reform how we treat people who are struggling with addictions. And there's a lot of evidence that other countries are implementing practices that are significantly more effective than what we're doing, what the states are doing, because clearly it's not working and many people are dying and lives are being ruined. So, you know, a lot of it is just about treating people like people. Mm-hmm. And I believe one of the quotes from the book is the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's community.
Yep.
So
I've heard that.
yeah, it's an excellent book that talks about what we should be doing differently. And
won't hear an argument from me on that one.
perfect.
Yeah, I actually think that I have heard this book being talked about because that quote I know I've heard being talked about.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't this book, but it's very true, that quote. Very, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, this book has been life-changing for me. Anybody who's dealt with any trauma in their lives or deals with any sort of mental illness, whether that's depression or anxiety or something more severe, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel A. Vander Kolk, I think. I'm really sorry if I butchered that name.
That's what we do here.
We butcher names.
We call people out and butcher names.
Perfect.
What's the name of the author again?
Bessel,
Oh yeah, say it again, Bree.
Bessel A. Vander Kolk.
Boom.
I'll do my best to find that.
Are you gonna ask her again, Sarah?
No, I won't torture you.
Like right after she says, "I think I butchered that," Sarah's like, "Oh, say it again, please."
Because I have to write it down. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
No problem.
And these are audiobooks, I assume,
Yeah.
if you listen to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I
Okay.
do is listen to books.
Perfect. So thanks, Daryl, for being here to co-host with me.
Thank you. I enjoy it. I love being on this show. You get to meet new and exciting people all the time and find out more about people and try and drag a bit of info out of them.
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
kind of like that.
And we often have people that we know very well on this podcast.
And you still learn
and you
something
still
about
learn
them.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a real treat to have you, Bree, here because
Thank you.
you aren't somebody who's in my immediate friend circle.
Yeah.
Although I'd like that to change.
Oh, absolutely.
And
me too.
But just getting to know you, really getting to know you, and I know you have some walls put up and there's things you can't talk about that maybe we can talk about one day off air. But getting to know you at least this much has been a true pleasure.
Thank you.
You're a good person.
That means a lot, and thank you so much for asking me to come on. I was thrilled when you did, and thrilled when I found out you mentioned me in one of your other
that was
episodes,
that was like, so creepy the way that all kind of happened, and yeah.
And my dad loved the hoodie that you made.
Oh,
and you guys as co-hosts is excellent. Like I said, I listen to a lot of podcasts and books, and the chemistry between you guys is great. And you made me feel immediately comfortable.
Awesome.
And very welcome. So
that's good.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming.
And check out the episode previous to yours about imposter syndrome. I think you'll like it.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of good tips in there.
That sounds exactly up my alley.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, you guys, and we will see you guys next week. Stay hip.